Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Dr. Jannine Hehmeyer. She's the physician founder of Well Empowered, where she's practicing data-driven, outcome functional medicine. Well, of course, we love data over here. We test, not guess. And Dr. Jesse and I have a fabulous conversation all about health, and in particular, us women, and how we kind of inherited how we take care of our bodies from what we've seen, from whether it's our caregivers, our mom, our grandma, or even social media these days. So, nevertheless, it's a great conversation, and we really get into how you can really change how you approach aging and how you approach health in general, diets, weight loss, all those things, if you kind of master that middle ground. So let's introduce you to Dr. Jannine Hehmeyer. Hey, health junkies, I have Dr. Jannine Hehmeyer on today, and we are going to be talking about how we've been kind of inherited this mindset around health and how it's supposed to look and how we're supposed to do things. And really what women have the most brain damage around that I've found is the whole weight loss thing. And holy cow, we have really done a number on ourselves in that department. So Dr. Jannine Hehmeyer, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thank you so much, Jannine. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your audience today.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm really excited to talk today because we have a lot in common in terms of our thought processes that we've discovered chatting off record here. And, really one of the biggest things that we're going to get to here in a little bit is really talking about that inherited paradigm around how we care for ourselves and our bodies. But before we dive into that, I would love to know, how did you come to become a doctor? What was that process? What was that pathway? I'd love to hear stories. So set us off.
You got it. Well, I always like to say straight lines are boring, and my journey to do what I do to become a doctor and practice data-driven natural medicine is definitely not a straight line. But for me, it really started with an aha moment. As I was graduating from college, I went to UCLA undergrad, and somewhere towards the end of my undergraduate program, it kind of hit me that, wow, isn't this interesting? I actually sculpt my class schedule around when I want to work out and move and use my body, right? Interesting, right? So that definitely caught my attention. And from there, I started to look at where I might go professionally that would allow me to contribute to people in their health. And I first started working as a physical therapy aide. I moved back to Chicago, where I'm from. And ultimately in 2002, before, boutique gyms were a thing, opened up the first high intensity strength training boutique facility in Chicago that is still there today.
Cool.
So I was the managing partner there for about 4 years. And towards the end of that, before I sold my half, why I decided to move along was that I saw I wanted to be able to contribute to people and their health journey at a higher level, expand my capacity to contribute. So I sold my half. From there, I did a little brief stint in medical sales and quickly realized that was not going to scratch the itch. Although I did learn a lot about the politics of insurance in that role. So that was useful. But ultimately made my way to medical school from there. So I got my degree first as a chiropractor, and somewhere in the middle of my chiropractic degree, saw the opportunity to shift my curriculum to really focus on data-driven natural solutions as opposed to musculoskeletal natural remedies, which most people think about with chiropractors. In the state of Illinois, unfortunately, as you know, naturopaths aren't licensed. So, right, I say I'm a naturopath trapped in a chiropractor's body, but people in Illinois don't know what a naturopath is. So from there, I went on to get my master's of science in nutrition and functional medicine. And, since I got my license, I've been practicing functional medicine and just really grateful to do this work with people.
Oh man, your story is not uncommon for a lot of us that run through this health field. Most folks have dabbled in fitness, in one realm or the other, and then moved into, either chiropractic or naturopathic in my case. And yeah, the funny thing, American Medical Association is in Illinois. So
That's right. Bingo.
that explains why us naturopaths will never hang out there fully. But all that aside, really, one of the things that I think maybe you might have seen too with the fitness industry, and I see it as probably where I ended up inheriting my paradigm around health, because I started working out in an early age. I started working out at like 12, 13 years old, as part of a recommendation from my swim coach. And they were all saying like, okay, you should start lifting weights, and let's build this body a little bit more. And then I started to see what was going on in the fitness industry, and then it just took off from there. So let's talk a little bit about this inherited paradigm, and kind of this all or nothing approach and things of that nature that's just not serving us. Tell us a little bit more about what you've seen.
Yeah. Well, in to add a little more color to the journey, for me, it was kind of in my mid to late 20s when I was an owner of that gym, where I was still struggling with my weight. And I really got that two things. First of all, I got what I was doing and had been doing for well over a decade was not working. Like, it wasn't working and getting me the outcomes. And it certainly wasn't working and having me feel empowered. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one thing I got. The second thing that I got was that I wanted my life to be a lot more than struggling with my weight. It was like the amount of time and headspace and emotional energy I was giving to this area of my life. Like, when I really sat down and contemplated it, it blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, my life is going to be about connecting with others deeply and contributing and experiencing the joy of life and living and evolving, right? And so for me, that really shifted my approach to my own health and opened the gates for me to master my weight. And for me, it always lived like in service of my future ability to do the same with others, right? So that's just a little bit more about the details of my journey. But to speak to the inherited paradigm, right? The inherited paradigm, first of all, it lives as an all or nothing expression, right? It's the Whole 30 followed by day 31. Give me a deep dish Chicago pizza and a bottle of wine, right? That's like, the all or nothing lived, right? And certainly something I could have related to in my 20s. And that whole all or nothing paradigm is, if we peel back the onion one more layer, it's an expression of self-aggression. And it just doesn't work, right? It's deprivation or overindulgence. These are the two options handed to people. And, there's just no winning. There's no winning. And so really, to me, where I invite people to move towards is a whole new paradigm that I call mastering your middle ground, right? And mastering your middle ground is an expression of self-love. And it's a lived journey. And it's when I work with people, it's collaborative in the sense that people need to understand what's going on with their body and where their points of leverage are, physiologically speaking, to support their body, their physiology, their health, such that they can produce the outcomes they care the most about. But also, there is this dance between making that progress, right? One foot in front of the other, or I like to think about it like crossing the monkey bars. Like, okay, we want to grab the next rung, and we want to select it intelligently, right? We want to see what's going to have spiral up benefits for you and move in this journey and learn over time.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And I like the middle ground, because I think part of what gets us in trouble is that restriction, and then tendency to binge. I've watched myself, oh, I haven't had potato chips in 3 months. And then I get a bag and I'm like, all right, who's the alien that ate those chips? Because it certainly wasn't me that ate the whole bag.
Right, right, exactly. But so many people can relate to this. I'm giving up XYZ. And so, typically the lead up to giving up XYZ means, complete overindulgence, right? I'm never going to have potato chips again. So I'm just going to eat 3 bags, not just one, just three. Give me three. I want all flavors. Just give them to me. Right. And then it's, a complete abstaining, and then again repeat the behavior, right? It's this back and forth and back and forth. And so it's such a joy in working with people and seeing people arrive at a place where they no longer use words like cheating or good or bad. It's like this whole expression of morality around what we're eating or drinking, what we're doing or not doing, right? Good, bad, cheat, should, shouldn't. That's all part of this inherited paradigm. And there's no good or bad in any of these things, right? They just produce certain outcomes, and either we like them or we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned the good or bad. I often feel like I am a priest and I'm sitting in confession often with clients when they're like, so I ate pizza on Friday, and I'm like,
cool.
Oh,
was it good?
Yeah. Like, where'd you go? Let me know. I want to know.
Seriously.
And so it feels like that. And I think, as women, I mean, I can go back to the 80s. I don't remember the 70s when I was a little too young for all of the 70s for me. But the 80s, I do remember watching my mom and how I inherited good and bad, even from her verbiage. Do you find that a lot of the clients you work with, even, us in our 40s and 50s, how much we kind of gleaned from that whole diet culture in the 80s and the Jane Fondas and all that kind of stuff?
Well, yes, for sure. But I would say it doesn't stop with us, right?
Yeah.
I would say most of the people who I work with, they fall from late 20s to early 50s for the most part. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm 46, right? So child of, bicentennial baby here in 1976, right? And so certainly I can relate to everything you're saying there, but definitely even these gals who are in their 20s and 30s, they've got their own version. Right. So it really is it's so I think a lot about how we ended up where we are. And I do think fundamentally speaking that our cultural obsession with physical perfection, and that's typically thin
Mm-hmm.
is what we culturally lean towards, at least at this moment in time, right? Where was it born? And I
Mm-hmm.
do actually think it came from a good place. And if you follow me on this, if you think about, okay, when did women actually have the right to have their own bank account? I mean, it was like the 60s. I mean, it was 2 seconds ago as far as history goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about time before that, any mother in the world, for their daughter, two things must be true. They must be able to have food, they must be able to have safety, they must be able to, three, shelter, part of safety, right? So all these things that any mom would do anything to secure for their daughter, it's like, okay, they're going to be beholden to a man. Let's make them as attractive a candidate as possible, right? And so, I think what once started out as maybe a somewhat understandable for the cultural moment sort of emphasis over time has really devolved into something that not only is not necessary but doesn't serve people.
Right. No, I can see needing that kind of, and now that we have our independence, that's a little different. But God, I couldn't imagine growing up. I couldn't imagine my 20s, right, with all the social media and all the waist trainers and all the like filters and stuff now, and trying to like navigate that, just it's so crazy to think that
I
on top of
totally
things.
agree. Have you heard of the term thigh gap?
No. Oh, wait. Yes, I have. It has to do with how much space is in between your thighs, right? Okay, I
Yes.
do know. Yes.
One of the women who I work with who's in her 20s, a couple of months ago, she said that word, and I was like, what? Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I can't imagine either, let alone, the young gals who are, 20s is bad enough, but 13, 14, 15 year olds, that is some serious tough business to navigate the social media world at that age.
and this is where, I really hope that this podcast can get to women that can talk to either their children or their grandchildren, because this middle ground mastery that you're working with, and the self-love concept, I think is so huge. And a lot of people are kind of poo-pooing it, being like, oh, self-love, you're just going to accept yourself however you are. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not this. And so
Yeah,
I'd love for you to talk about self-love a little bit.
totally. So to me, self-love is a lived expression, right? So to me, it really is true. If we love ourselves and we love this life, and our intention is to be here fully in every sense of the word, well, an expression of love is to do what we know to do to have that be true, right? So to fuel our bodies in a way that we know lets us thrive, to
Mm-hmm.
move our body in ways we know lets us thrive, to sleep, to rest, to engage, all the different things. All of those are an expression of self-love. And when you're coming at it from that perspective, people really get tuned into when they take actions that are self-betrayal, right? And by that, I mean, they see, wow, I regret having done that because it wasn't an expression of self-love, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was either deprivation or overindulgence, right? Or just flat out something that didn't serve me, right? But being able to see that is part of the journey. And that requires, developing the ability to be both kind and honest, which is not something that lives in the inherited paradigm, right? In the inherited paradigm, people are either kind and they don't look, right? They don't look at what actions they're doing or not doing. Maybe they don't look at the scale or their blood work or whatever, right? Or they look and they just beat themselves up, right? And I promise, it is a practice skill to be able to be both kind and honest, but it is doable. And I think being able to see when our actions are not an expression of love is really, it's important. It's important to be able to see that, because then you can get more clear about what would best serve you in the future and start to make those shifts.
That's huge, because I think about it and I go, a lot of times, I mean, now I can see, right, the difference. But I think even back 5 years ago, being a doc, even I had those thought processes that I wasn't really seeing it as being aggression to myself. It was being, I am restricting because I'm not eating gluten and dairy and, wheat and soy and corn because I want to be healthy, and I'm not going to do it ever, and this and that. But I wasn't thinking of it in the terms of self-love. I was thinking it as in, like you said, aggression. And gosh, this body, it won't adjust, it won't lose weight, I'm just going to restrict it from everything. And I see that, I get that, now. But I think for a lot of women, like you said, it takes some time. What would you, if someone's listening right now and they're like, okay, I kind of see how taking care of myself in that manner is good, but sometimes I have these cravings and I'm I'm overtaken by these cravings.
Yeah.
How do I navigate that?
I would say a few things. One is, can you see what leads to the cravings?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for example, for some people it might be, well, yeah, I I didn't have breakfast and it's now 3 o'clock. Okay, well, guess what? When you get that hungry, you are actually engineered to crave fast fuel when you get that hungry. Fast fuel being sugar or simple carbs, like the potato chip sort of situation, because your body wants that fuel fast. Those things are absorbed quickly. That glucose gets boosted quickly. So there's a very intelligent design that's behind those cravings. So, if that rings true, it's like, okay, great. How can we help you get fuel in your body earlier in the day such that you don't arrive to that place where you can't even make a sane choice because you're so hungry, right? So that's one way I think about it. Another way of thinking about it is, are you looking for pleasure, right? And in which case, like, it's very human and natural to want to experience pleasure. And are there ways you could experience that pleasure that are more aligned for you, more an elevated expression of love? So in other words, maybe it's a different food, but still scratches the sweet tooth itch, for example. Or maybe it's the same food, but it's just a smaller quantity, right? Could you be fine with 3 cookies instead of 6? Great. That's a better choice. Fine. Right. And, and to kind of build on that last point, there is really to be in the journey of playing a better game and throwing away the belief that it needs to be a perfect game. Right. So cravings take hold. It's like, okay, fine. Can you just play a better game?
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, it makes sense that we get stuck in this circle of restrict, then binge, restrict, then binge. And it doesn't have to be, and guys, gals who are listening, the binge doesn't mean like binge disorder. I'm talking about like just overindulging, like Dr. Jesse's been saying. And I think, do you think that really, because this is kind of where I've concluded in terms of what kind of keeps weight on women, is the binge restrict kind of pattern that
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I really do see it over and over again. And, I will say, layer on top of it the amount of shame people feel about what they're doing or not doing. And it just sets the stage for a vicious circle, right? Because, again, people have a hard time sometimes seeing exactly what they're doing because it feels like such a personal failure. But if people can remove the idea that there is any good or bad, right? They're really, like you said, people arrive to your, to appointments, like, confessional style, right? You're the priest.
yes.
And so, yeah, totally. Right. So what if people, just kind of gave up any internal dialogue or external about what they're doing that's good or bad, and just really started living in a conversation called what's a better game? What's a better choice I can make right now? That question can go a long way if it's lived in earnest. If it's lived in earnest, and over again, coming up with a new answer for each moment.
I think this is good for many to hear, especially for the women who have spent most of their life on a diet, or trying to lose that same 10, 15, maybe 20 now pounds over and over again. It's something that I see a lot in my practice where I have women coming in saying, look, I'm doing all the things and I'm still not losing weight. I'm working out. I've tried to up the workouts. I've tried to drop the workouts. I've tried to do this. I've tried to do that. And so just so that we can give some clarity here, we're looking at behaviors. We're looking at thoughts as the root here, not another diet, not another exercise program.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I would say thoughts themselves can be habits, right? We all have our habit thoughts and like the instant replay. And so starting to see those and shift those does open up access to new actions and, with gentleness over time, repeated. So yeah, absolutely.
In the whole realm of weights, it is something that I see being the main thing that women will come to me, even though they're like, I know it's my hormones or it's my thyroid or it's this or that. But, ultimately, if we do find something else, okay, we work on that too. But it'll always come back to like, okay, my weight's still not coming off. And so with your program, I would love to hear kind of how you work with folks. Like, how do you start out? How do you kind of progress through so folks can hear a little bit more about, you know, the whole Well Empowered program? And I think you have a different name for your other programs, but I'll let you kind of tell us.
Yeah, sure. So I think about, okay, fundamentally speaking, what does it take to master anything? It takes information, inspiration, and strategy. Information, inspiration, and strategy. And, you know, when I work with people, we integrate those three over and over and again over time. So information, when I first start working with people, we start with a health audit, and that really gives us access to detailed information on how their body is working and where our points of leverage are to support their body. When we're talking about weight, to your point, it's so funny. It makes me laugh when, sometimes I'll encounter a woman who comes to see me for digestive, IBS, digestive distress, or skin stuff, but almost inevitably, it's also like, and a side of weight loss, right?
Yes.
It's
Please,
very
please.
cute.
Mm.
Yes, 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 yes. So, getting that information, but also in the way of inspiration, I would say that inspiration is different than motivation, right? Motivation is
Mhm.
fleeting, and it's what fuels the, New Year's resolutions and the whole 30 and, things like that. But inspiration is fundamentally, I have found that people can tap into inspiration when they get very clear on their intention for their health and their life, right? And I call this creating your vision of vitality. But your intention for your health and your life fundamentally is giving words to how you intend your health to be and occur, and how you intend to experience your health, as well as what that makes available. Right. And so getting clear on that, but then also staying connected to it, right? Really remembering that this is what it's about. And never, ever once, it's so funny, Jannine, never once has anyone said anything about the scale or their weight in their vision of vitality. Because it's really, at the end of the day, what do people want to do? They want to feel their best and look their best so they can be their best.
Mhm.
It's really just that simple. And that will be expressed differently, but that's really, to me, what it's about. So working with people, beyond the health audit, then we go from solution to resolution, and that's
Mhm.
really a journey we engage in over time. And I give people homework after appointments so that they can start to integrate things and author their journey with my support and guidance, right? It's definitely a collaborative endeavor. And then, of course, there are people who I work with. I have a weight loss collective, and
Mhm.
there are women who I work with there who that's all they're, solely what they're focused on, and they're at the point where they have enough very clear understanding of their body's specific needs that the group dynamics work well for them.
Nice. Nice. No, I think that's really important. This day and age is having the group dynamics for the weight loss. I think a lot of people need the group support, but also just looking at the whole health audit and things of that nature, because I think this is a very great topic to kind of bring in. Weight coming on the body, not feeling your best. There's a lot of different things that could be going wrong. And it's not always just the thyroid, your gut, or, hormones being off. Can you speak a little to what you commonly find in terms of health audits? Like, what seems to be, I know the ones that I mentioned, but also, like, what else do you
Yeah.
find that's off?
Yeah, very commonly I see elevated inflammation, right? And I'm sure you see this too, Jannine, right? Sometimes people will show up at a virtual appointment and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so inflamed." And I'll ask them how they experience it in their body. And they'll say,
Mm.
"Oh, I'm bloated," or I my I'm breaking out, or my joints hurt. People say different things that feel like inflammation for them. But most people have no symptoms of inflammation, right?
Mhm.
They are chronically inflamed, and the only way we know it is by running labs, by doing the tests to figure out what their inflammatory markers look like, right? And so when inflammation is elevated, the body gets shifted into energy conservation, aka fat storage, right? So inflammation is going to just be hell on the metabolism, and people are going to be working upstream until we knock that down, and how we knock that down is going to depend on the person, but nutrition, supplementation, and lifestyle fundamentally are going to be the tools that we use. So elevated inflammation, and happy to talk markers if you want, but I don't know if that's a little too down the rabbit hole. I'm sure we run some of the same ones, HSCRP and homocysteine are my, pretty common go-tos for inflammatory markers. Yeah. And then, sometimes I'll throw in some that are more heart oriented if I feel like that's a concern for the person in front of me. And then, suboptimal insulin sensitivity all day long, right? Big one. And, we know that lab normal is what, like 19 or so, depending on the lab.
Depending on the lab.
Yeah. 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 And I like to see it at 7 or less. So, that's definitely a big one. And, then all these nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies, which are going to dance with either hormone production or the receptors. And those could be everything from omega-3s to vitamin D to, I know these are all things that you look at regularly too, but they really do add up over time to create a situation where people are, just feel like they're pushing a rock uphill, and they are, physiologically speaking, because their biochemistry is just at that moment working against them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love that you're mentioning the markers. We talk about them here. I think it's good for folks to hear them and write them down and ask your docs, or if your doc won't order them, that's one of the biggest things I hear, then find one that will.
That's right.
How it works. You find one that will. Now, in terms of looking into all these things, when folks come to you, obviously the health audit's probably going to guide you in the direction. Do you tend to order the metabolic labs, kind of like what you're talking about, inflammation, things of that nature, and then will you order specialty testing? Do you look at oat testing? Organic acids? Do you look at testing? Like what's your kind of thing that you find to be most useful for you? I'd love to hear from different.
Yeah. So definitely a lot of, labs like the ones we talked about, right? So those I do on almost everyone. I can't really think of anyone who I haven't done at least some on. Even, maybe someone arrived with a solid panel and I just want to add on a few additional if they were done recently. But in the way of specialty lab tests, that is very much that's more specific to the person in front of me, right? So sometimes it will be an oat test, sometimes it will be one of the microbiome assessments, or adrenal and sex hormone, or Dutch, or it just kind of depends on the person. Yeah, I would say, people, I feel like I'm getting this less, but there definitely was like a good chunk of time where people were asking for food sensitivity tests, and I don't do them very much anymore. I just don't find them necessary or all that useful usually.
Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of come to that conclusion too. I've definitely gotten to that stage. If someone wants it and that they're gung ho on wanting it, I'm not going to say no, but I agree with you. It's not as useful as figuring out like what else is out of balance that makes those foods difficult to break down, or, usually it's more of a functional thing. What is your favorite functional medicine test? Just out of random curiosity.
The microbiome assessment, whether it's, I dance back and forth between Genova and Dr. Stata, but I love their 3 days, both of them. I love them. To me, it's like, there's no other way we're getting that information. So, there's so much we learn through those tests. So I will say, I definitely don't do them on everyone. I only do them if it's clinically indicated, but I do love them because I discover things that I just can't learn in any other way.
And folks who are listening, the microbiome assessment she's talking about with Drs. Data and Genova, these are looking at core stool samples, not just the swab things like the Viome and different testing like that. This actually looks at how you digest the foods. Do you find that a lot of folks really who are older are struggling with enzyme deficiencies, like as a whole?
Honestly, not that much. I
Okay.
like, via these tests, it's oftentimes someone will arrive at an appointment and, if they're dealing with bloating or constipation or diarrhea, they've started themselves on some kind of digestive support from, enzymes. And I will have them stop before doing these tests.
Mhm.
And um, it's rare that I find that to be like the thing. Sometimes I find it to be a part of the equation,
Sure.
but I don't see it as much as I feel like the world says it's there.
Yes. Yes. What about what do you tend to see being more like, let's go with constipation for a second, because I think that
Yeah.
constipation is such a big issue for so many women.
Yes. Yeah. Well, two things. First of all, I always joke I'm going to write a book someday called The Life-Changing Magic of Pooping, because I love helping people poop. It's great, right? Everybody feels so much better. So, with constipation, I am going to look at the foundations, right?
Mhm.
Are you drinking water? Without water, the pipes can't get flushed out, right? Are you consuming foods that have fiber? And if so, is that maybe causing your constipation, oddly, right? Because
Mhm.
that definitely in the SIBO world, that can definitely be a problem for some people. But if not, then we want to start pulling the fiber lever, so to speak, to help the body. But in the way of, labs, what I'll see with constipation is if I'm doing the microbiome assessment, I'll see a low pH, which then makes me think about SIBO. And also, I'll see some kind of disruption, whether that's yeast present or a pure, quote unquote, bad bacteria, like dysbiotic bacteria, or a chunk of imbalanced bacteria that they're going to say, okay, these shouldn't be present, but they're not disease causing bacteria. But, I think about it like, well, if there's 6 of these present, there's synergy between these guys. These guys are not welcome. So those are definitely some of the big things that I see with constipation. Then, there are absolutely people who I see have more of a like motility problems,
Mhm.
right? And so we'll go at that with some supplements, but we'll also look at how we can help their body shift into the parasympathetic world a bit better, whether that's through simple things like gargling to stimulate the vagus nerve, or meditation, or just coming up with something that works for the person in front of me. And then certainly there are all kinds of great supplements that can be useful to that end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, constipation, I think, is one of the biggies that I do find to be, it's funny. A lot of women, I don't know if you've noticed this, if they have looser stools, they're like, I might lose a couple pounds. It's cool. But
Oh,
constipation, oh,
totally.
heck no.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We are fun creatures. We certainly are. Man, we have talked about a lot of different things and gone down some good rabbit holes with folks here. And I think, ultimately I'd like to bring it back to really just learning more about ourselves and how important it is to understand why we do the things we do, what kind of habits and behaviors are contributing here. So, of course, that's what you're teaching folks, getting back to the middle ground, getting out of this all or nothing approach and away from the inherited paradigm of health and what it means to us. So, tell us a little bit, Dr. Jesse, of how folks can work with you. Let's talk about your Well Empowered site. Let's talk about all the things, because you've got webinars on there. There's all kinds of stuff. Give us the scoop.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who's interested in exploring working together, wellempowered.com is my website. And please schedule a complimentary 30-minute Zoom consultation. We can talk. I can learn more about you. You can learn more about my approach, ask me questions, and really just look at, what's your next best step for you in your health. I do work with people, obviously, one-on-one, and we'll be launching a weight loss collective here in the months ahead. So if that's of interest to anyone, please do pop in there and schedule that complimentary consult. And yeah, on social media, you can find me on Instagram at Well Empowered, and that's where mostly I live on the social media world.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, good to hear that you've got some great resources out there for folks. The collective coming for the weight loss. That's good. We will definitely make sure that folks get all that info in my notes at drjkrausend.com. So stay tuned for that, guys. Dr. Jessie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some great information and reminding us that we can find the middle ground. All we have to do is just learn a little more about ourselves.
Such a pleasure to be here with you, Jannine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, Health Junkies, are you feeling just off? Feeling like you're aging a little bit faster than you want to and wondering what in the world is up? Hey, I might have some answers for you and some direction. If you want to chat with me, I am offering complimentary calls right now. You can head over to Dr. spelled out JKrausend.com. Take my quiz, click on the schedule a chat, and let's talk and see if we can get you in the right direction. And if I'm able to help you, I'm going to let you know. Otherwise, I'm going to help you find what you're looking for. Head over to drjkrausend.com and check it out now. Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.